In the heart of New York City, where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and dreams were as big as the skyline itself, there lived a young man named Alex. He wasn't just any ordinary guy. He was the son of Richard Kensington, one of the richest men in America. Richard had built his empire from scratch, starting with nothing but grit and determination. Everyone knew him for his sharp mind and even sharper tongue. But while Richard thrived on control and power, Alex couldn't have been more different. Alex didn't care much for boardrooms or business deals. His world revolved around cameras, lenses, and capturing moments that told stories. From bustling street corners to quiet countryside paths, Alex traveled far and wide, documenting life through his lens. To him, every click of the shutter was like freezing time, a way to preserve beauty, pain, joy, and everything in between. It was his passion, his escape, and his purpose all rolled into one. But Richard saw none of this. All he could see was his son wasting his potential. In Richard's eyes, Alex was squandering the opportunities handed to him on a silver platter. The older man had worked tirelessly to give his family a life of luxury, and here was Alex, choosing to chase rainbows instead of building the legacy Richard envisioned. Every conversation between them ended in arguments, each more heated than the last. One evening, after yet another failed attempt to convince Alex to join the family business, Richard snapped. They were sitting in their luxurious penthouse overlooking Central Park, surrounded by opulence that most people could only dream of. Yet despite the grandeur, the air was heavy with tension. Richard leaned back in his chair, his face red with frustration, and finally said something that would change both their lives forever. "Enough," Richard barked, slamming his fist on the table. "You think you can keep running away from responsibility? Fine. I'll teach you what it means to grow up." Alex looked at his father, confused. "What are you talking about?" Richard stood up, towering over his son. "If you won't take this seriously, then maybe you need a little motivation. You have 6 months to get married, or you'll lose everything. Your inheritance, your trust fund, everything." Alex's jaw dropped. "Are you serious right now? You're forcing me to get married?" "Oh, I'm very serious," Richard replied coldly. "And don't think you'll get to choose someone either. I'll pick your wife myself." It felt surreal, like something out of a bad movie. Alex couldn't believe what he was hearing. Marriage wasn't even on his radar, let alone being forced into it by his own father. But Richard wasn't done. Yet, with a sly smile, he added, "And just so we're clear, she won't be some high society girl. No, I've already chosen her. She works at a diner downtown." "A diner?" Alex echoed, incredulous. "Dad, why are you doing this?" "Because you need a wake-up call," Richard shot back. "Maybe living with someone who knows the value of hard work will knock some sense into you. Either way, consider this your punishment." With that, Richard walked out of the room, leaving Alex stunned and furious. How could his own father treat him like this? It wasn't fair. Alex paced the room, trying to make sense of it all. Who was this waitress his father had picked? What kind of life would they lead together? And most importantly, how could he possibly fight against such an absurd demand? The next day, still reeling from the bombshell, Alex decided to visit the diner. He figured if he was going to understand the situation, he might as well meet the person at the center of it. The place was small and unassuming, tucked away on a side street. Inside, the smell of coffee and fried food filled the air. People chatted casually, servers moved briskly between tables, and behind the counter stood Emily, a young woman with a warm smile and tired eyes. Emily wasn't glamorous, like the women Alex usually met at social events. Her clothes were simple, her hands rough from hours of work, and her demeanor humble. Yet there was something about her that caught his attention. She carried herself with quiet strength, as though she'd faced challenges but refused to let them break her. When Alex approached her, introducing himself awkwardly, Emily listened patiently, nodding when he explained the bizarre circumstances. To his surprise, Emily didn't judge him. Instead, she offered a perspective he hadn't considered. "Life throws us curveballs sometimes," she said softly. We don't always get to choose what happens to us, but we do get to decide how we respond. Her words stayed with Alex, long after he left the diner. For the first time, he realized that maybe this whole ordeal wasn't just about punishment. Maybe it was also an opportunity. An odd, twisted one, sure, but an opportunity nonetheless. If nothing else, meeting Emily had given him a glimpse into a world vastly different from his own. A world where people worked hard not because they wanted to, but because they had to. Where happiness wasn't measured by bank accounts, but by the love and support of those around you. Over the following weeks, Alex found himself visiting the diner more often. At first, it was curiosity that drew him there. But soon he discovered that talking to Emily made him feel lighter somehow. She listened without judgment, shared her own struggles openly, and never once treated him like the billionaire's son. To her, he was simply Alex, a guy trying to figure things out. As their conversations grew longer and deeper, Alex began to realize something unexpected. He liked Emily, not just as a friend, but as someone who challenged him to be better. Someone who reminded him that life wasn't just about chasing success. It was about finding meaning in the everyday moments. Meanwhile, Emily was navigating her own emotions. She knew Alex came from a completely different world, one she could barely imagine. Still, she couldn't deny the connection they shared. There was a sincerity in him that she hadn't expected, a vulnerability hidden beneath his polished exterior. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, they started forming a bond, one that neither of them had anticipated. Back at the penthouse, Richard watched all of this unfold with smug satisfaction. He believed his plan was working perfectly. Little did he know, the real story was only beginning. After their initial meetings at the diner, Alex and Emily started spending more time together. At first, it was just casual conversations during her breaks or quick chats when the diner wasn't too busy. But as days turned into weeks, they began to share pieces of their lives with each other, small stories that revealed who they truly were beneath the surface. Emily told Alex about her childhood, growing up in a modest neighborhood where everyone knew each other by name. She spoke fondly of her younger brother, whose health issues had forced her to take on extra responsibilities early in life. "He's my reason for everything," she said one evening, her voice soft but filled with determination. "I want him to have a good life, even if it means I have to work twice as hard." Alex listened intently, realizing how much he took for granted. His world had always been one of privilege, private schools, luxury vacations, and endless opportunities, handed to him without question. Hearing Emily talk about her sacrifices made him reflect on his own choices. For the first time, he felt a pang of guilt for complaining about things that seemed so trivial compared to what she dealt with daily. In return, Alex opened up about his struggles with his father. He admitted how suffocating it felt to live under, Richard's expectations always being pushed toward a future he didn't want. "It's like no matter what I do, it's never enough," he confessed. "And now this whole marriage thing, it's ridiculous. I don't know why he thinks forcing me into something will fix anything." Emily nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes people think control is the answer because they're scared of losing what matters to them," she said. "Your dad probably wants the best for you, he just doesn't know how to show it in a way that makes sense to you." Her words struck a chord with Alex. He'd spent so much energy resenting his father that he hadn't stopped to consider why Richard acted the way he did. Maybe there was more to it than sheer stubbornness. Still, that didn't make the situation any easier to swallow. As their friendship deepened, Alex found himself drawn to Emily in ways he hadn't expected. She wasn't flashy or glamorous like the women he usually dated, but her kindness and resilience captivated him. There was a quiet strength in her, a determination to keep moving forward despite the odds, that inspired him. And while she might not have realized it, her presence was slowly changing him too. One afternoon, as they sat together at a corner table in the diner, Alex brought up the looming deadline set by his father. "6 months isn't a lot of time," he said, fiddling with his coffee cup. "If we don't figure something out, I'll lose everything." Emily frowned. "What exactly are you planning to do?" "I don't know," Alex admitted. "Part of me wants to fight back, prove to him that I won't let him control my life. But another part of me wonders, what if we actually went through with it? Got married, I mean. Emily raised an eyebrow. You're serious? Not really, Alex replied quickly. But hear me out. If we agreed to this, for show, at least it could buy us some time. We could keep living our separate lives while pretending to play along with his rules. By the time he realizes nothing has changed, maybe he'll give up. Emily hesitated. The idea of entering a fake marriage sounded absurd, even laughable. But then again, wasn't her entire life built on finding creative solutions to impossible problems, taking care of her brother, working long hours at the diner, juggling bills? All of it required thinking outside the box. Could this be another challenge she could handle? What would happen after 6 months? She asked cautiously. We'd call it off, Alex said. Tell him it didn't work out. He can't hold me to the agreement forever, right? Emily mulled it over, weighing the pros and cons. On one hand, agreeing to such a plan felt risky. What if things got complicated? What if emotions got involved? But on the other hand, she couldn't deny that helping Alex stand up to his father appealed to her sense of justice. Plus, there was something undeniably intriguing about stepping into a world so different from her own, even if it was just temporary. Okay, she finally said. Let's do it, but only if we lay down some ground rules. Alex grinned. Of course, name them. First, we keep our lives separate, Emily stated firmly. This is strictly business, no falling in love, no drama. Agreed, Alex said, though a small part of him wondered if that rule would be harder to follow than either of them anticipated. Second, we tell the truth, if anyone asks. No lies, no hiding. This is already crazy enough without adding deception to the mix. Fair enough, Alex replied. Anything else? Emily paused, thinking carefully. Just promise me you won't disappear once this is over. You've been honest with me and I appreciate that. Let's keep it that way. Alex nodded. Deal. With that, they shook hands, sealing the pact. Neither of them knew what the future held, but they both felt a strange sense of relief. For Alex, it was the first time in months that he felt like he had some control over his life. And for Emily, it was a chance to step outside her comfort zone and see what lay beyond the familiar walls of the diner. The next few weeks flew by in a blur. They decided to move in together, not because they wanted to, but because Richard would expect it. Alex rented a cozy apartment downtown, far enough from his father's prying eyes, yet close enough to maintain appearances. Emily packed her belongings, reluctantly, still unsure about this whole arrangement but willing to give it a shot. Living together proved to be both easier and harder than they'd imagined. On the surface, they fell into a routine quickly. Emily woke up early to head to the diner while Alex spent his days exploring the city with his camera. They cooked dinner together most nights, sharing stories about their respective days. It was simple, almost domestic, and surprisingly enjoyable. But beneath the surface, tensions simmered. Emily often caught herself wondering if she was making a mistake. Was she setting herself up for heartbreak by getting too close to someone like Alex? Meanwhile, Alex struggled with guilt. He knew he should be focused on photography and building his career, but he couldn't help feeling distracted by Emily's presence. Her laughter lingered in his mind long after she left the room, and her smile stayed etched in his memory. Despite these challenges, they managed to navigate the early stages of their unconventional partnership. They attended social events hosted by Richard, putting on a convincing act of being happily engaged. To outsiders, they looked like the perfect couple. Alex, charming and confident, and Emily, sweet and down-to-earth. Even Richard seemed pleased, though his approval came with a healthy dose of skepticism. You two seem different, he remarked during one family dinner. Are you sure this is real? It's real, Alex replied smoothly, glancing at Emily. We're figuring things out just like everyone else. Richard studied them closely, searching for cracks in their facade, but all he saw was sincerity, or so it appeared. Satisfied, he leaned back in his chair and smiled. Good, keep it up. As the months passed, Alex and Emily grew closer, their bond strengthening with each shared experience. They laughed together, argued occasionally, and supported each other through ups and downs. What had started as a reluctant agreement was blossoming into something neither of them had anticipated. And somewhere along the way, they began to realize that maybe this arrangement wasn't just about defying Richard. Maybe it was about discovering parts of themselves they hadn't known existed, and learning that sometimes the most unexpected paths lead to the greatest adventures. As weeks turned into months, Alex and Emily's lives became intertwined in ways neither of them had anticipated. What started as a reluctant agreement to play along with Richard's demands slowly began to feel like something more genuine. They weren't just pretending anymore. They were building something real, even if neither of them wanted to admit it yet. Living together brought its own set of challenges, but it also created moments that neither could ignore. Emily would wake up early to get ready for her shift at the diner, and Alex would often join her in the kitchen making coffee or scrambling eggs. Those quiet mornings became their favorite time of day, a chance to talk without distractions, to share thoughts and dreams before the chaos of the world stepped in. It was during one of these mornings that Emily realized how much she enjoyed having Alex around. "You know," she said one day, sipping her coffee while leaning against the counter, "I never thought I'd say this, but living here, and it feels kinda nice." Alex looked up from his plate, surprised by her admission. "Nice? Really?" "Yeah," she replied with a small smile. "It's not what I expected. You're not what I expected." He chuckled softly. "What did you expect?" "I don't. No, someone who only cared about money and status, I guess. Someone used to getting whatever they want." "Well, technically, my dad is forcing me to marry you," he joked, raising an eyebrow. "So maybe I'm still spoiled." Emily laughed, shaking her head. "You know what I mean. You're different from most people I've met. You actually... listen." Her words lingered in the air between them, heavier than either intended. Alex felt a warmth spread through his chest, though he tried to brush it off. He didn't want to read too much into things, not yet anyway. But the truth was, he couldn't deny how much he admired Emily. Her strength, her resilience, her ability to find joy even in the toughest situations. It all fascinated him. She made him want to be better, to see the world differently. Meanwhile, Emily was wrestling with her own feelings. She told herself over and over again that this arrangement was temporary, that she shouldn't let herself get too attached. But the more time she spent with Alex, the harder it became to remember why she was supposed to keep her distance. There were little things, like how he always remembered to ask about her brother, or how he'd bring home flowers after a long day just because he knew it would make her smile. These gestures might have seemed small to others, but to Emily they meant everything. Their bond deepened outside the apartment, too. Alex started joining Emily at the diner occasionally, sitting in a corner booth and sketching scenes on napkins, while she worked. At first, the regulars were skeptical of him, a rich guy hanging out in a place like this. But soon, they warmed up to him, especially when they saw how genuinely interested he was in learning about their lives. He photographed the cooks flipping pancakes, the elderly couple who came every morning for breakfast, and the kids playing arcade games in the back. His lens captured moments of humanity that many overlooked, and Emily loved watching him work. 1. Evening after closing time, Emily found Alex sitting alone at a table, surrounded by prints he'd developed earlier that week. She pulled up a chair and leaned over to look at them. The images were stunning, raw, honest, and full of emotion. One photo caught her eye, a close-up of her hands holding a tray, calloused and worn but steady and strong. "That's beautiful," she said softly. "When did you take that?" "Last week," Alex admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "I didn't mean to sneak it, but I couldn't resist. Your hands tell a story, you know. Hard work, determination, love." Emily felt her cheeks flush. No one had ever described her like that before. To her, her hands were just tools, things that helped her get through the day. But seeing them through Alex's eyes made her realize how much she carried within her, how much she gave to the people she cared about. You have a gift, she told him sincerely. Not just with photography, but with seeing people. Most people don't notice the details. You do. Alex smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in his expression. I wish my dad could see things the way I do sometimes. Maybe then he wouldn't push so hard. Emily reached out and placed a hand on his arm. He loves you, Alex. In his own way, he does. He just doesn't know how to show it. Alex sighed, looking down at the table. Maybe, but it's exhausting, Em. Trying to live up to someone else's expectations, it wears you down. Get it, she said quietly. Believe me, I do. My whole life has been about meeting other people's needs, my brothers, my bosses, even yours now. But you can't lose yourself in the process. You have to figure out what you want. Her words stayed with him long after they left the diner that night. For the first time, Alex allowed himself to consider what truly mattered to her. Was it wealth, success, approval? Or was it something simpler, something he'd been chasing all along without realizing it? As their connection grew stronger, so did their confidence in standing up to Richard. They attended family gatherings and social events, putting on a united front whenever his father prodded them for updates. Richard watched closely, convinced that his plan was working perfectly. He believed Alex would grow miserable in such an unconventional pairing, and eventually come crawling back to beg forgiveness. But what Richard failed to anticipate was how much Alex was thriving. Free from the pressure of corporate life, Alex poured his energy into photography, capturing stunning images inspired by Emily's world. He photographed the streets where she walked, the diner where she worked, and the park where she sometimes sat during her breaks. His work gained recognition, earning him accolades in artistic circles far removed from his father's influence. Galleries began reaching out, offering to showcase his pieces, and magazines featured his photos on their covers. For the first time in years, Alex felt alive, like he was finally doing something that mattered. Emily noticed the change in him too. Gone was the restless, conflicted man she'd met months ago. In his place stood someone confident, passionate, and driven. And while she was proud of him, she couldn't help feeling a twinge of fear. What happened when the 6-month deadline arrived? Would Alex go back to his old life, leaving hers behind? Or would he choose to stay? The turning point came one rainy afternoon when Emily received a phone call from her brother. His condition had worsened, and he needed urgent medical attention. Panicked, she rushed to the hospital, calling Alex on the way. Without hesitation, he dropped everything and met her there, staying by her side until the doctors assured them that her brother would be okay. That night, as they sat together in the hospital waiting room, Emily broke down. All the stress, worry, and exhaustion came pouring out, and Alex held her tightly, letting her cry. When she finally calmed down, she looked up at him, tears still glistening in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for being here. I don't know what I'd do without you." Alex cupped her face gently, brushing away a stray tear. "You don't have to thank me. I'm here because I care about you, Em. More than I should probably admit right now." His confession hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. Emily's heart raced, unsure of how to respond. Part of her wanted to pull away, to protect herself from the inevitable pain of loving someone who lived in a completely different world. But another part, the part that had grown to trust and admire him, knew she couldn't run anymore. "Care about you too," she admitted softly. "But this, us, it's complicated." "I know," Alex said, his voice full of sincerity. "And we'll figure it out. Together." In that moment, surrounded by the sterile walls of the hospital, they both knew their relationship had shifted. It wasn't just about defying Richard or surviving a forced marriage anymore. It was about finding something real, something worth fighting for. And as they held each other under the fluorescent lights, they silently vowed to face whatever came next, no matter how uncertain the future might be. The bond between Alex and Emily had grown stronger than either of them could have imagined. What started as a reluctant agreement to play along with Richard's demands had blossomed into something real, something neither of them wanted to lose. But just as they began to embrace the idea of a future together, cracks started to form in their carefully constructed world. Secrets that had been buried deep beneath the surface began to rise, threatening everything they'd built. It all started on an ordinary Tuesday evening. Emily was tidying up the apartment after a long day at the diner when her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a text message from someone she didn't recognize, a number she hadn't saved. The message was short but unsettling. "Ask him why his dad really chose you." Emily stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Who was this? And what did they mean by why? She tried calling the number back, but it went straight to voicemail. Confused and uneasy, she decided to brush it off as a prank or a wrong number. But the words lingered in her mind, gnawing at her thoughts like a persistent itch she couldn't scratch. Later that night, Alex came home, carrying a bag of groceries and a bouquet of wildflowers he'd picked up for Emily. He greeted her with a warm smile, oblivious to the storm brewing inside her. They sat down to dinner, chatting about their days, but Emily found herself distracted. The text message kept replaying in her head, and before she knew it, the question slipped out. "Alex," she said hesitantly, twirling her fork around her plate. "Do you know why your dad picked me?" Alex froze mid-bite, his fork hovering in midair. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "What do you mean?" "I mean, why me specifically? There are plenty of waitresses in New York. Why did he single me out?" Alex set his fork down and sighed. He'd been dreading this conversation ever since they agreed to go along with his father's plan. He knew Richard's motives weren't pure, but he'd hoped to shield Emily from the truth for as long as possible. Now, faced with her question, he realized he couldn't avoid it any longer. "My dad, he wanted to test you," Alex admitted reluctantly. "He thought if I married someone like you, someone who worked hard and lived a simple life, it would teach me humility. Make me appreciate what I have." Emily felt her stomach drop. "So, this whole thing was some kind of experiment? A game to see how we'd react?" "It wasn't supposed to be like that," Alex said quickly, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I swear I had no idea he was using you like that. When we agreed to this, I thought it was just another one of his schemes to control me. I never imagined he'd involve you in such a twisted way." Emily pulled her hand away, feeling a surge of anger and betrayal. "You should have told me," she said, her voice trembling. "From the beginning, you should have told me the truth." "No," Alex replied, his tone heavy with guilt. "And I'm sorry, I didn't want to hurt you. I thought if we just focused on surviving these 6 months, we could get through it without letting him win. But now, I don't even know what winning means anymore." Emily stood up abruptly, pacing the room as tears welled up in her eyes. "This isn't fair, Alex. None of this is fair. Your dad treats people like pawns in his chess game, moving us around however he wants. And I fell for it. I actually believed we were building something real." "We are building something real," Alex insisted, standing up to face her. "None of this changes how I feel about you. You're not just some pawn to me, Em. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." But Emily wasn't ready to hear it. Her mind raced with questions and doubts. Had their entire relationship been tainted by Richard's manipulation? Was Alex truly sincere, or was he just caught up in the moment? She needed space to think, to process everything that had been thrown at her. "I need to be alone for a while," she said finally, grabbing her coat and heading for the door. "I'll call you tomorrow." Alex watched helplessly as she left, feeling a weight settle over him. He knew he'd messed up, not just by keeping the truth from Emily, but by allowing his father's actions to dictate their lives. For the first time, he realized how much damage Richard's games had caused, not just to him, but to the woman he loved. The next few days were tense. Emily avoided Alex, throwing herself into work to distract herself from the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. Every time she thought about the text message and Alex's confession, she felt torn between anger and sadness. Part of her wanted to believe that what they had was genuine, that their connection went beyond Richard's interference. But another part of her couldn't shake the feeling that she'd been used, manipulated into playing a role she never signed up for. Meanwhile, Alex tried reaching out to Emily multiple times, leaving voicemails and sending texts, but she didn't respond. He understood why she needed space, but it didn't make the silence any easier to bear. He spent hours reflecting on his own mistakes, vowing to make things right if she'd let him. Their strained dynamic reached a breaking point during a charity gala hosted by the Kensington family. It was a glitzy event, filled with wealthy donors, socialites, and business tycoons. Alex had hoped to skip it altogether, but Richard insisted he attend, citing it as an opportunity to showcase his matured son and his new wife-to-be. Reluctantly, Alex convinced Emily to come along, promising that they wouldn't stay long. Dressed in a borrowed gown and uncomfortable heels, Emily felt out of place among the sea of designer dresses and diamond jewelry. She stuck close to Alex, trying to blend into the background while avoiding curious stares. Richard, on the other hand, seemed thrilled to show off his son and future daughter-in-law. He made a grand speech during dinner, praising Alex for finally growing up and embracing responsibility. "It warms my heart to see my boy stepping into his role as a leader," he declared, raising his glass. "And to welcome Emily into our family, a shining example of hard work and dedication." The room erupted in applause, but Emily felt sick to her stomach. She glanced at Alex, who looked equally uncomfortable, and then at Richard, whose smug grin made her blood boil. Enough was enough. Before she could second-guess herself, Emily stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. The room fell silent, as all eyes turned to her. Taking a deep breath, she addressed Richard directly. "You think this is some kind of victory, don't you?" she said, her voice steady despite the nerves coursing through her. "You think forcing your son to marry someone like me proves a point. But let me tell you something. You don't get to use people like pieces on a board. This isn't a game. These are real lives you're messing with." A murmur rippled through the crowd as everyone turned to look at Richard, whose face had gone pale. Emily continued, undeterred. "I may not come from your world, but I have integrity. Something you clearly lack. If you think treating others like tools will teach your son anything, you're wrong. All it does is push him further away." The room was dead silent. No one dared to breathe as Emily stepped back from the microphone, her hands shaking but her resolve unshaken. Then, before anyone could react, Alex stood up and joined her side. "She's right," he said firmly, looking straight at his father. "This ends now. I'm done playing your games, Dad. I won't let you control my life or hers anymore." For a moment, it felt like time stood still. Richard's jaw clenched, his pride wounded in front of everyone he cared about. But Alex didn't care. He took Emily's hand and led her out of the ballroom, leaving the stunned guests behind. As they stepped into the cool night air, Emily let out a shaky breath. "That was intense." Alex nodded, squeezing her hand gently. "I meant every word. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together. No more secrets, no more lies. Just us." Emily looked at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. For the first time in days, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe they couldn't undo the past, but they could choose how to move forward, together. The fallout from the charity gala hit like a storm, shaking the Kensington household to its core. Richard's public humiliation at the hands of his son and Emily left him seething with anger and frustration. For a man who prided himself on control, it was unbearable to see his plans unravel in front of an audience filled with people he respected, or at least wanted to impress. But what stung even more was the realization that Alex wasn't backing down this time. That night, as Alex and Emily walked away from the gala, they didn't speak much. The weight of what had just happened hung heavy between them. They knew there would be consequences, big ones, but neither regretted standing up to Richard. As they drove back to their apartment, Emily finally broke the silence. "What happens now?" she asked softly, staring out the window at the city lights. Alex sighed, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "I don't know. But whatever it is, we'll deal with it together." Emily turned to look at him, her expression a mix of fear and determination. "You really meant everything you said back there, didn't you?" "Every word," Alex replied without hesitation. "I'm tired of living under his shadow, Em. I want to build something real with you. Not because my dad forced us into this, but because I care about you. Because I love you." His confession caught Emily off guard, though deep down, she'd suspected his feelings ran deeper than friendship or convenience. She felt her heart swell, but also a pang of uncertainty. Could they survive everything that was coming? Was it possible to move forward when so much stood in their way? "Love you too," she admitted quietly. "But loving someone doesn't make life easier. Your dad isn't going to let this go. He'll fight back, Alex. And it's not just about us. It's about your family, your future." "I know," Alex said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "But for once, I'm ready to fight for what I believe in. For us." The next morning, Richard called Alex into his office. The air was thick with tension as Alex walked in, bracing himself for the confrontation he knew was coming. Richard sat behind his massive desk, his face unreadable but his eyes burned with barely contained rage. "You humiliated me," Richard said coldly, leaning forward. "In front of everyone. Do you have any idea what that does to my reputation, to our family name?" "It wasn't about you," Alex shot back, standing tall despite the intimidation tactics. "It was about setting things straight. For me. And for Emily. You can't keep treating people like pawns in your games. It stops now." Richard slammed his fist on the desk, making Alex flinch slightly. "You think you're so noble, don't you? Running off with some waitress, throwing away everything I've worked for. What do you even see in her? She's nothing compared to what you could have." "She's everything," Alex said firmly, his voice rising. "She's kind, strong, and honest, qualities I wish I saw more of in you. You've spent your whole life trying to mold me into something I'm not, Dad. Well, guess what? I'm done being your puppet." Richard stared at him, stunned by the defiance in his son's tone. For years, Alex had bent to his will, grudgingly, following orders even when he disagreed. But now something had shifted. Alex wasn't just resisting, he was fighting back. After a long pause, Richard leaned back in his chair, his expression hardening. "Fine. If that's how you want to play it, then fine. But don't come crying to me when you lose everything. Consider yourself cut off, from the company, the trust fund, all of it." Alex swallowed hard, knowing this moment would define the rest of his life. Losing his inheritance meant starting over from scratch, but strangely, the thought didn't scare him as much as it should have. Maybe it was because he'd already found something far more valuable. Freedom. "I won't," Alex said simply. "Goodbye, Dad." When Alex returned home, Emily was waiting for him, her face etched with worry. He told her everything. How Richard had disowned him, how they were officially on their own now. To his surprise, Emily didn't panic or try to talk him out of it. Instead, she wrapped her arms around him and held him close. "We'll figure it out," she whispered. "We always do." And figure it out, they did. Stripped of his wealth and privilege, Alex faced challenges he'd never imagined. Rent payments, grocery bills, and utility costs became real worries instead of abstract concepts. At first, it was overwhelming, but Emily guided him through it, teaching him how to budget and prioritize. Together, they moved into a smaller apartment, trading luxury for simplicity. Meanwhile, Alex poured his energy into photography, determined to make a name for himself outside of his father's empire. He started documenting stories of ordinary people, waiters, janitors, street performers, giving a voice to those often overlooked by society. His work gained traction online, earning praise from critics and fans alike. Soon, galleries began reaching out, offering him opportunities to showcase his art. Emily, too, pursued her dreams with renewed vigor. Inspired by her brother's recovery, she enrolled in nursing school, working long hours at the diner to pay for tuition. It wasn't easy juggling work, studies, and their relationship, but they supported each other every step of the way. Late-night study sessions turned into shared meals, and stolen moments of laughter kept them grounded during tough times. Despite their hardships, they found joy in the little things. the warmth of sunlight streaming through their windows, the sound of rain tapping against the roof, the comfort of holding hands while walking through the park. Life wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Months passed, and slowly things began to change, not just for Alex and Emily, but for Richard as well. Watching his son struggle yet thrive without his help left Richard conflicted. On one hand, he was furious that Alex had defied him so completely. On the other hand, he couldn't deny the pride swelling in his chest whenever he saw news of Alex's photography exhibitions or heard whispers of his success. One evening, unable to ignore the ache of loneliness gnawing at him, Richard picked up the phone and dialed Alex's number. When Alex answered, his tone was cautious but polite. "Dad," he said flatly. "What do you want?" "I want to talk," Richard replied, surprising even himself with the vulnerability in his voice. "Can we meet? Just to talk." There was a long pause before Alex responded. "Okay, but bring no conditions, no demands, just you." They met at a quiet cafe downtown, far removed from the glitz and glamour of their usual surroundings. Over cups of coffee, they talked, really talked, for the first time in years. Richard apologized for his actions, admitting that his need for control stemmed from fear of losing his family. Alex listened, his anger softening as he realized his father wasn't invincible after all. By the end of their conversation, they weren't fully reconciled, but it was a start. Richard promised to respect Alex's choices, and Alex agreed to give their relationship another chance, not for Richard's sake, but for his own. As the months turned into years, Alex and Emily built a life together rooted in love, resilience, and mutual support. Their journey hadn't been easy, but it had taught them invaluable lessons about trust, forgiveness, and the importance of staying true to oneself. And though Richard remained a complicated figure in their lives, his presence reminded them of how far they'd come and how much they'd overcome to create a future on their own terms. Years had passed since the chaotic night of the charity gala, and Alex and Emily's lives had transformed in ways neither could have predicted. What began as a forced arrangement orchestrated by Richard had evolved into a partnership built on love, trust, and shared dreams. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were thriving, creating a life that reflected who they truly were. On a crisp autumn evening, Alex stood nervously in front of a crowd gathered at an art gallery downtown. This wasn't just any exhibition, it was his first solo show, a culmination of years of hard work, passion, and perseverance. The walls were adorned with photographs that told stories of resilience, hope, and humanity. Each image captured moments from everyday life: a street vendor smiling despite the chill, a child laughing as raindrops splashed against a window, a nurse comforting a patient in a hospital hallway. These weren't just pictures, they were glimpses into the beauty of ordinary existence. Emily stood beside him, her hand resting gently on his arm. She looked radiant in a simple yet elegant dress, her eyes shining with pride. As Alex scanned the room, he saw familiar faces, friends, mentors, colleagues, but none meant more to him than the woman standing next to him. Without Emily, none of this would have been possible. She had been his anchor during the toughest times, encouraging him when self-doubt crept in and reminding him why he started this journey in the first place. The gallery buzzed with excitement as people admired the photographs, exchanging whispers of admiration. Critics praised Alex's ability to capture raw emotion, while casual visitors found themselves moved by the authenticity of his work. It was a moment of triumph, not just for Alex but for everything he and Emily had built together. As the evening wore on, Richard arrived, slipping quietly into the back of the room. He hadn't been invited, not officially, but he couldn't stay away. Watching from a distance, he observed the scene unfold. Alex greeting guests with confidence, Emily laughing warmly as she chatted with admirers, and the two of them sharing quiet glances that spoke volumes. For the first time in years, Richard felt a pang of something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time: pride. When the crowd thinned out, Alex noticed his father lingering near the entrance. Their eyes met briefly before Richard approached hesitantly, unsure of how he'd be received. Emily noticed the tension and gave Alex's hand a reassuring squeeze before stepping aside to give them space. "Congratulations," Richard said gruffly, his voice tinged with both pride and regret. "You've done well." Alex studied his father carefully, searching for sincerity behind the words. "Thanks," he replied cautiously. "I didn't do it alone." Richard nodded, glancing toward Emily, who was now talking animatedly with a group of visitors. "She's remarkable," he admitted. "Strong, smart. I see now why you chose her." "It wasn't about choosing her," Alex corrected gently. "It was about realizing what matters most. Dad, I don't need your approval anymore. I stopped needing it a long time ago. But if you're here because you genuinely want to understand me, then maybe we can start over, not as billionaire and heir, but as father and son." Richard swallowed hard, visibly moved by his son's words. "I'd like that," he said softly, "if you'll let me." For a moment, they simply stood there, the weight of years of misunderstanding hanging between them. Then, tentatively, Richard extended his hand. Alex hesitated before accepting it, their handshake firm yet uncertain, a small step toward healing old wounds. Later that night, after the gallery emptied and the lights dimmed, Alex and Emily walked home hand in hand. The streets were quiet. The city bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. Neither spoke for a while, content to savor the peacefulness of the moment. "You know," Emily finally said, breaking the silence, "tonight reminded me of something important." "What's that?" Alex asked, glancing at her curiously. "That no matter how far we've come, we still have so much to look forward to. We've built this amazing life together, but it's not the end. It's just the beginning." Alex smiled, squeezing her hand. "You're right. And whatever comes next, I know we'll face it together." They reached their apartment, a cozy, little place filled with memories of laughter, struggle, and growth. Inside, photos lined the walls, snapshots of their travels, candid moments with friends, and cherished images of Emily's brother, who was now healthy and pursuing his own dreams. Every corner of the space reflected their journey, the highs and lows, the challenges and victories. As they settled onto the couch, Alex pulled out a small box from his pocket. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet engraved with a single word: together. "I wanted to give you something tonight," he explained, fastening it around her wrist, "to remind you of everything we've been through, and everything we'll keep building." Emily blinked back tears, her heart swelling with gratitude. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Just like us." Over the following months, Alex and Emily continued to grow individually and as a couple. Alex's photography career soared, earning him international acclaim and opportunities to travel the world. Yet no matter where his work took him, Emily remained his constant source of inspiration. Her unwavering support fueled his creativity, and her belief in him kept him grounded. Meanwhile, Emily graduated top of her class from nursing school and landed a job at a prestigious hospital. Her compassion and dedication quickly earned her the respect of patients and colleagues alike. Though balancing work and personal life wasn't always easy, she found joy in knowing she was making a difference, one person at a time. Their relationship with Richard also improved, albeit slowly. He made an effort to reconnect, attending family dinners, and even volunteering at a local shelter alongside Alex. While their bond would never be the same as it once was, they found common ground in mutual respect and understanding. Richard learned to appreciate Alex for who he was, rather than who he thought his son should be. One summer afternoon, Alex and Emily returned to the diner where it all began. It felt surreal to walk through the doors again, surrounded by memories of their earliest days together. The owner greeted them warmly, thrilled to hear about their success. As they sat in their usual booth sipping coffee and reminiscing, Emily turned to Alex with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if your dad hadn't forced us into this?" Alex chuckled, shaking his head. "Honestly, I try not to think about it, because if it weren't for him, I might never have met you. And that's something I'm grateful for every single day." Emily smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. Me too. Funny how things work out, isn't it? Yeah, Alex agreed, wrapping an arm around her. Funny and beautiful. As they sat there, surrounded by the hum of conversation and the clinking of dishes, they realized that their story wasn't just about overcoming obstacles or defying expectations. It was about finding meaning in the unexpected, embracing change, and discovering that true success isn't measured by wealth or status, but by the connections we forge and the lives we touch. And in that moment, they knew they wouldn't change a thing.